Okay, thank you. I'm Lucien Grouès, a telecom Paritech student about to start a thesis at INRIA Paris. And I'm going to talk about combining hard and soft decoders for hypergraph predict codes. So why such codes? As it was explained earlier this morning, it's a powerful quantum code constructions that allows to build a CSS quantum code. So using two classical codes, or simply, as we will do later, just one code combined with itself. So, for example, if you use the repetition code, you'll end up with the toric code. So it's a generalization of this, which has good properties, such as conserving the LDPC property of the classical codes, or giving pretty good parameters. So if the classical code has a constant rate and a linear minimal distance, you'll end up with a constant rate quantum code, but with a minimal distance in the square root of the code length. And moreover, as it was explained earlier this morning, it allows to do a constant overhead fault tolerance using expander codes. Yet, even though it builds a powerful codes, we don't know still how to decode them efficiently. So there refers the small set flip decoder, which has a theoretical bound which is very low, and the belief propagation decoder that is widely used in the classical case, but doesn't work in our case. So I first present these two decoders, and our idea is to combine them in order to improve, we hope, the performance. So the small set flip is a so-called hard decoder in the sense that it directly flip bits in order to reduce the syndrome weight. So it was explained in detail earlier, but basically you try to decrease the syndrome weight by flipping a small set of qubits, which allows, it was the algorithm used to prove the fault tolerance with constant overhead. So basically what we want to know is that it has a computation time in the code length, and that it has a theoretical very low bound. So it's they managed to prove that it works under a very low error rate. Yet Gros-Pellier and Krishna showed that using LDPC code, you could get a pretty good threshold at 4.6%. So I'll show their simulations. So they used the product of a random 5-6 regular LDPC code. So the checks and the bits have constant degrees, which are equal to 5 and 6 respectively. And here I just plot the block error rate depending on the physical X error rate. So we see that we want the curves to be as low as possible, and as we increase the size of the block, we have better and better results. And in fact, they found a threshold around 4.6%, which is, as I said, far better than the theoretical rate. And our work, our idea is to improve even further this result using the belief propagation. So it's a so-called soft decoder, as it computes probabilities. So for each bit, for example, here for the bit 0, it will compute its probability to be faulty knowing the syndrome. And to do so, it's based on the Tanner graph and uses message passing. So each bit will send messages up to the bits up to 0. So combining at each check the information. And so we have the number of rounds, the number of message passing rounds we do is directly linked to how deep we look into the graph. So yeah. So here, for example, it would be exact on this tree if we look at a depth of 2, which should be enough. So yeah, it's proven to be exact on trees, yet to have a powerful codes, we need the Tanner graph not to be a tree. Yet it's still widely used in the classical case because, in fact, if we have a Tanner graph with a girth big enough, even if there are cycles, it will make good approximations of the probabilities. And moreover, we can compute all these probabilities at once, which makes the algorithm pretty fast. Yet that's only in the classical case. Once we go into the quantum case, there are many problems that arise, as it was shown by Poulin et al. And so the first one is that by construction, there are many force cycles in our graph, which makes the Gauss too small. So the probabilities are badly approximated. And moreover, it doesn't take into account the code degeneracy, which makes that even if the probabilities were computed precisely, it wouldn't be the one we need, in fact. So that's it for the two basis algorithms. And our idea is to combine them into BP plus SSF, where we simply first decrease the size of the error using the belief propagation, and then try to correct the residual error using the smooth cell clip. So here are our results in blue on the last line. So we see that compared to the line above is the work of Gropoli and Krishna, using just the smooth cell flip, we managed to have a better threshold. So we did half of the way to the threshold of the toric code. And we also managed to have a better rate and a smaller stabilizer weight, which is needed to do it in practice. So there are other papers that try to improve the decoding of LDPC hypergraph product code. So for example, Kovalev and all tried to use an estimated minimum weight decoder, which gave pretty good results also on the same codes as ours. And there is also the work of Pantelev and all, which will be presented on Thursday, which who weren't focused on the threshold, but managed to have a very good results using small cyclic hypergraph product codes and an algorithm imported from the classical case, which is the order statistical decoder. So that's it for the case where the syndrome is noiseless. Now we also started to look at the case where it's noisy, but didn't have time to compute precisely the threshold. So we hope to have a threshold around 3%, which would be at least as great as the toric code. And moreover, we benefit from a single shot property, which is very great. So that's it for the summary. Now I'll go into the detail. First presenting what classical codes we used to build our quantum codes. Then I present the case where the syndrome is noiseless and noisy. And finally, I'll sum up our work. So we want to improve the work of Gropoli and Krishna. So to do so, we are interested into decoding quantum codes built from LDPC, regular LDPC classical codes. So to build such classical codes, there are several ways. The first one is to use random codes, which in fact we don't want them to be totally random. We want them to have the property to have few small cycles, as we want to run the belief propagation. So to build such graphs, there is in fact the progressive edge growth algorithm that builds graphs with quite large Gauss, and which is very fast. Yet we managed to improve the result using an algorithm based on random local modifications and a most accurate scoring system. Yet I won't go into the detail, but we managed to improve a bit what we got with the PEG. Now we also looked at small cyclic codes hypergraph, as it gave a very good result in the work of Pantelev and all. Yet we didn't manage to find a good family, and so we decided to look at a more general family, which are quasi-cyclic codes. But once again, it didn't behave well. So in the end, we decided to use random 3-4 regular LDPC codes to build our quantum codes. So now I'll start with this noiseless syndrome case. And so with the error model, it's a simple XZ independent errors model with the same error probability for both kinds of error. So we decided to use this ZIN model as it allows us to correct the errors independently, which in fact will make us use only half of the tenor graph at once, meaning that this time the tenor graph won't have a girth of 4, but a girth of 8, which is far better for the belief propagation algorithm. And it allows us also to look only at the case where there are X errors. Okay, so now for our simulation protocol, it's very simple. We just flip each qubit with the probability p. We compute the syndrome, run the decoder on the syndrome, which gives us a correction, and we just have to check whether the correction is equivalent to the error. So we did it on the belief propagation algorithm, and we see that as we increase the block length, results are getting worse and worse. So yeah. So in fact, we didn't find any threshold above 0.5%, but it's not really surprising, as it's not supposed to work. So yeah, it's just to have a comparison later with the BP plus ASF. So we see that it fails a lot, so we wanted to know how it behaved when it fails. So in fact, we see that there is a common behavior. It happens quite a lot. So here we have, basically, we want to know what happens if on a given error pattern. So this plot was generated using only one error pattern. And we want to see what happens if we run the belief propagation for 1 round, 2 rounds, etc., up to 2050 rounds. So we see, and we want to know how small will be the syndrome after we apply the BP correction, and whether or not we have a good likelihood. So the likelihood represents how sure we are of our correction, of the correction we apply. So what we see first is that it oscillates quite a lot, and that it seems to be almost periodic. We have the same pattern repeating almost itself almost perfectly. And moreover, we see that in fact here we have the maximum likelihood that occurs almost at the same time as the minimum syndrome weight, meaning that the two seems, it might seem logical, but they are highly related. So we want to take this into account when building our BP plus SSF. So as I said, the behavior we saw before is quite common, and in fact there are almost never logical errors. When the belief propagation fails, it's because it didn't manage to reach a code word, which means that trying to apply another decoder afterwards can improve the result. So we saw last slide that even if it doesn't converge to a code word, it manages to decrease quite a lot the syndrome weight. So we can hope not to be too far away from a valid code word. So we can try to use a small set flip to close the gap. And yet, because of the oscillations, we can't run the belief propagation for a fixed number of rounds. If we are unlucky, we could stop when the syndrome weight is very big. So the small set flip will have a hard time trying to decode afterwards. So we decided, in fact, to use the syndrome weight as a figure of merit to know when to stop, as it was highly related to the likelihood. So we decided to stop at the first minimum of the syndrome rate. So why the first minimum? So basically, the first reason is that it's easy to compute. But also, we may think intuitively that the less rounds the belief propagation does, the less deep into the graph it will look, so it will see less cycles. So we may hope that the probabilities won't be too corrupted by the many cycles. Okay, so we tried it, and here we see that as we increase the block length, the results are getting better and better, up to 7.5%. And that's the threshold we found. So it's far better than using either of the basic algorithms alone. And moreover, it allows us to use better codes than the small set flip alone, in the sense that we can have codes with smaller stabilizer weights, but higher rates. So now we'll try to improve the stopping condition, as it may seem a a bit suboptimal in the sense that it makes the decoder vulnerable to a bad first local minimum of the syndrome weight. What I mean by bad first local minimum is a local minimum which doesn't correspond to a maximum likelihood. So we don't want to stop there. So to solve it, it's very simple. We just have to run the belief propagation for a fixed number of rounds big enough, and then go back to the best state, which could be either the state where we had the minimum syndrome weight or the one with the highest likelihood. So we tried it. We tried both stopping conditions with 100 rounds, and it didn't give good results, in fact. It did improve the results for the small codes, but only for them. And the curves were acting strangely with sweet values and crossing several times, so it didn't seem right. So that's all for the noisy syndrome case. Now I'll present the noisy syndrome case and how we model it. So first, why are we interested in this case? It's because in the context of fault tolerance, that's what we want. We won't be able to compute the syndrome perfectly. So we have to check that our algorithms still work in this case, and we may have to adapt them. And once we do that, we will want to compute to evaluate their performance, but we won't be able to do it the same way as in the noiseless syndrome case. So to model this, we use the same model as Brockman and al., where the idea is that you have several rounds of noisy syndrome. So that basically correspond to the different parts of your calculus, and the last round will be an exact syndrome measurement. So the reason why is that in the end you measure your qubits, so you end up with classical information, which allows you to compute the syndrome perfectly. So during each round, you apply a correction. Yet, as the syndrome is noisy, you often, most algorithms will need to measure it many times to have enough information to compute the correction. Typically, for the toric code, you need a square root of n measurements before having gathered enough information to compute the correction. Yet in our case, we need only one measurement, so it's called a single shot property, and it's very useful in practice. So now I explain how we compute the performance. So we use the same method as Brown and al. And so the problem in this case is that the threshold, the place where the error rate where the curves will cross depends in fact on the number of faulty rounds that we call T. So what we are interested in this time is the limit of the threshold as T grows. And it's what we will call what is called the sustainable error rate. So the idea is that under this limit, we can improve the durability of the information simply by increasing the size of our code. So to compute precisely this limit, we need to do a fitting of the curves, as the dependence on T is not trivial. Yet we didn't have time to do it yet. So all our results will be approximates. Okay, so now I'll present the protocol we use. So we call the decoding algorithm D1 power T D2, where D1 and D2 are two decoders. The first one is used during all the noisy syndrome case, and the last one and the next one for the last round. So our algorithm will take in input a code word and will output whether or not we manage to protect it during the T faulty rounds. So we first have the T faulty rounds, which each one begins with we add at the beginning of each noise on our qubits. We then compute the syndrome and we'll add noise on this syndrome. So we use the same probability. We flip the qubits with the same probability as we flip the bit of the syndrome, just to be easiest. It's not obligatory. So then once you have the noisy syndrome, you just run the decoder D1 on this syndrome that will output a correction. An important thing here is that we assume the noise is IID. it's the case for the first round, but as the number of rounds increase, we apply more and more partial corrections. So there is no reason, in fact, for the noise to be IID after the first round. Yet we assume it, and we apply the correction and the code word. So after the T rounds, we apply one last error on our qubits. We compute the syndrome perfectly this time. We run the decoder D2, still assuming the noise is IID. We apply its correction, and to know whether or not we manage to protect our code word, we just have to check that the new word is equivalent to the word we had in input. So the idea here is that we want to use combinations of BP and SSF as D1 and D2. So we have to adapt them to the case where the noise is, the syndrome is noisy. So in fact, as explained Omar earlier this morning, there is no need to adapt the smooth set flip. It will in fact run pretending that the syndrome we give to him is perfect. So so it will try to reduce the weight of the syndrome, of the noisy syndrome, and and once it can't reduce it anymore, it will say that in fact all the unsatisfied checks left are due to the syndrome error. So basically, if we apply both corrections of the smooth set flip, meaning the qubit and the syndrome correction, we'll end up with a syndrome weight equal to 0. Yet, in the case of the belief propagation, we don't need to apply adaptation. So here we have a very basic Tanner graph with the 3 bits having any value, and when we measure our checks, we have this one outputting the right value. So basically, it outputs what we want, but this one outputs the wrong value. So it doesn't mean anything for the belief propagation, but we see that in fact it's equivalent to saying that we are on a bigger Tanner graph, where the check having outputting the right value is linked to a bit equal to 0, and this one linked to a bit equal to 1. So saying that if we measure, if these bits, if these checks output the right value, it will give the same result as these checks. So in fact, we will just end up running the belief propagation on this graph, which we may notice that adding these bits won't add any cycles or reduce the girth. So it's very good. So yeah, we tried using these 2 algorithms. So we wanted to combine them into the BP plus SSF. So as we see, the belief propagation will now have also a guess on the syndrome error. So meaning that it will compute the probability of each of the extra bit nodes. So if each of the extra bits, so it will in fact give us the probability for each check to be in error. So before giving the syndrome to the smooth set flip, it will apply both its corrections. Yet we must notice that contrary to the case of the smooth set flip, the belief propagation, the syndrome error guess of the belief propagation is not equal to all the unsatisfied checks left. So in fact, if it applies both its corrections, there are still some checks unsatisfied, meaning that when we use a smooth set flip afterwards, it will do something. It will be able to reduce the syndrome weight. So here's what we get. So we have, there isn't enough points yet, clearly, but we plotted the threshold depending on the number of faulty rounds T, and we see that we can hope to be around 2.5%. So that is the case where we use BP plus SSF as D1 and D2. Yet we also tried to use just BP as D1, and we see that quite surprisingly, we get better results. We may hope even to converge above 3%. So even though there isn't enough points yet. So that might seem strange that we get a better result using just the BP as D1 instead of BP plus SSF, as we found that BP plus SSF had far better results in the noiseless syndrome case. So we may have a possible explanation. So it's based on the fact that even though the BP has a guess on the syndrome error, in fact he is not good at guessing it. In practice, above 2.5% of error rate, the belief propagation will increase the weight of the syndrome error. So that means that the small self-flip will receive a syndrome with quite a big error, which might be a problem since the small self-flip, the way we use it, assumes that the syndrome given is exact. So if there are too many errors, it may the small self-flip may take us very far away from any valid code word when applying its correction. In the contrary, as BP takes into account this noise, it will keep us in the good area, and we can think that it will keep us around the valid code words, and in the end, we only need the small self-flip to close the gap to make us reach exactly a code word. So it's strange, but good for us since it gives a better result and faster computation. So we don't mind. So to sum up, we had a heuristic approach to try improving the decoding of LDPC hypergraph product codes using combining BP and SSF. So we first looked at the Noisy syndrome case, and we had pretty good results compared to the small self-flip alone. So we managed both to improve the rate of our codes, diminish the stabilizer weight, and improve the threshold. So that's very good. And we also started to look at the Noisy syndrome case, and here we see that even if we don't have we didn't compute it precisely yet, we can hope to have a sustainable error rate threshold around 3%. So to continue with this work, we would like first to look to try to adapt our codes, our quantum codes, to different error models. Typically, we could try to use two different classical codes to deal with the depolarizing channel. When for this work we used only one classical code combined with itself. And I want to point out that we didn't, even if we get good results, we didn't adapt the belief propagation to the case, to the quantum case. So in particular, it still doesn't take into account the degeneracy. So it's still an open question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for the nice talk. Are there questions in the back?
Hi, thanks for a nice talk. So you showed some results in that there are fluctuations in success probability for BP as the number of rounds change. So I was wondering if there's any correlation between these rounds and the size of the code that you're looking at.
Yes, basically. Yeah. So basically, it's not very clear, but we noticed that the more, the bigger the code is, the more rounds you have to do before reaching the first minimum. So, yeah, that's the only correlation we found.
Okay. And also, I guess one more question is, so in the previous numeric study by Grospillier and Krishna, they found that the 5-6 graphs usually performs a lot better than other families of graphs. So is there any particular reason that you use 3-4 instead of 5-6?
Yeah, the reason is that it works better with BP plus SSF, even though 5-6 codes are better when using a BP or SSF, but 3-4 codes are better for BP plus SSF. We don't know why, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Just if you are interested, in fact, the fluctuation of the performance of BP depending on the number of rounds exists also in the classical case. So there are some works on it if you want. Yeah.
Michael?
Thanks a lot. Do you have a good picture of the stabilizer weight of the codes that you're looking at? What's the distribution of the weights?
Oh, basically they are all equal to 7.
7.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for a very nice talk. Maybe I missed it. Do you perform your simulations on depolarizing channel or on the channel when you have separate X and Z errors?
Yeah, no, sorry. It's on independent X and Z.
And do you have simulations for depolarizing channel? Because as far as I can see, you use a binary version of BP, so that performs not so well compared to non-binary. That takes into account the correlation between X and Z.
Yeah, we didn't did it yet. Yeah, yeah. No, we didn't have time to look at it yet. So.
Thank you.
Are you using hard decision BP decoding or soft decision BP decoding? Do you think there will be a better performance if using the soft decision one?
For the BP propagation? Oh, you mean that, yeah, those models, yeah. After the BP propagation, we use hard values, not soft values, basically. We try to adapt the small set flip to use a soft value, value BP decoder, but we didn't manage to do it. But the work of Pantelev and all is using, I think, more of a soft BP propagation. In the sense that the algorithm, the decoder they use afterwards takes as input soft values, not just yeah, the syndrome weight, the syndrome.
Thanks for the interesting talk. So I think there was a bit towards the end where I didn't quite understand what you were saying. So you had two versions of BP plus set flip decoder and the inequality sign. And I think I missed what the difference was between those two types.
That will be annoying. So before?
This is exactly it. Yeah.
Okay.
These two different.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't. Yeah. So the difference is that for the first one we use BP plus SSF as D1 and D2. So if you remember. Here, we have two decoders, and for the first version, we used D1 and D2. We used BP plus SSF as D1 and D2, but for the second one, we used just BP as D1 and BP plus SSF as D2.
Okay. So to decode the syndrome to try and find the minimum weight solution that's.
Sorry. Yeah.
So you're decoding the syndrome. Maybe I forgot what D1 was as well.
Oh yeah, no. So in fact, D1 is the decoder we use during all the noisy syndrome rounds, and D2 is the decoder we use for the last round, which
okay,
is perfect.
got it. Yep.
And basically, the idea is that if the syndrome is noisy, the small set flip won't work well. So that's why.
Okay, now I understand what the difference between D1 and D2 is. Can we go back to the plot and you can tell me again what the two things were? Okay, so the first one is D1 and the second one is D2.
Yeah, the better one is the one, yeah.
So the best thing to do was to use the same decoder for D1 and D2.
No. No, sorry.
Okay.
So, no, yeah, I didn't, it wasn't clear. So, the best thing was to use just BP as D1 and BP plus SSF as D2.
Okay, got it.
Sorry.
Are there any more questions? Maybe I have a short one. So have you maybe thought about using BP, kind of, I don't know, do as good as you can, and then maybe just brute force? Do you think this would improve things, even though this is not like a scalable decoder?
It's a bit like...
exactly, like the OSD.
No, so yeah, we didn't try, but yeah, we think... yeah, I think it will give... Yeah, it will take too much time, but yeah, the idea to improve, I think, the BP propagation is yeah, to find a decoder to apply afterwards, which force us to reach a code word, since it's mainly the problem with BP propagation. It just takes us around the code word, but not precisely on it. But yeah, no, we didn't try brute force.
Okay, let's thank Lucien again.